Hello and welcome. Today we have our first Thriving Thursday, and our topic is emotional intelligence. So thank you for tuning in. We're going to talk about emotional intelligence as it is in regards to leadership. So my presentation today is Leading with Heart. My name is Maria Cerce. I work for the University Housing Services events team. I also help coordinate Welcome Week, and I am an advisor for IHC and NRHH, who are also doing amazing programs. So if you haven't checked those out, you should. Okay, so to begin, we're going to do a warm-up exercise. And so for those of you that are tuning in on YouTube, you can take a moment to just think about this yourself, of a time where you had to make an important decision. So I want you all who are participating to think of a time you had to make an important decision. How did you feel? How did you make that decision? Or did you? So did you end up deciding? So take a moment and just think of that time that you had to make an important decision. How did you feel? How did you make that decision? And did you decide? So I'm going to take, if one of you who's participating right now would like to share your specific example of when you had to make an important decision, that'd be great.
I could go.
Thank you, Brenda.
This happened back in 2017, fall of 2017, my previous institution. My team and I, we were going to host a student-led conference for the housing region in California. Unfortunately, during that time, it was also during the Northern California fires. So being one of the co-chairs, I didn't feel that it was good for us to be bringing in folks into our city, knowing that our, our quality of air was a lot worse than in their cities. So I had to make the decision to actually cancel 2 days before the conference. Honestly, it did not feel good because there was a lot of months that went into preparing, not only with the professional team, but also with our resident advisors, with IHC, NRHH, and our volunteers. However, it was the decision we needed to make in order to keep everyone safe, because we were also looking at the safety of our volunteers, everyone involved, and also for the folks that were going to be joining us. I ended up deciding that alongside my co-chair. It was something that we ended up talking alongside our supervisor as well as our dean of students, because all of us four were the main ones leading the conference. And then from there, we had to also get a hold of the region president and be like, hey, this is the decision that's going to be made. Now we need you to make sure that that information and that message is being sent out to the universities that were going to join us.
Wow, thank you for sharing that, Brenda. So it seems like you had a lot of responsibility and there was a lot of different key stakeholders that you had to consider when coming to that decision, and also sharing some of that responsibility in making that decision. So that's really quite interesting that you were in that position, and that you had that opportunity, even though, you know, it is a bummer that you didn't get a chance to put on that amazing conference. And I know it would have been with all those months of preparation. But also a valuable learning experience that we can all kind of learn from, and thinking about the different factors that go into making a decision. And if you haven't gotten the drift yet, your feelings are a part of making that decision.
Yes.
Okay, so Lead with Heart is the title of this presentation. But what is heart? Anyone want to share what they think heart is?
May I?
Okay, Juan, go ahead.
So, sorry I cut off. It's not the best, but what I think heart is basically just something that you feel at times, trying to determine what's the best, what's good, what's great, you know, stuff that makes stuff happy, good. Typically, when I think of heart, I think of feelings such as like good, great,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah, I'd say, Yeah, feeling definitely. I think when we talk about heart, we talk about passion, we talk about, we
That's
also highly identify that with something that's essential as a part of who we are, and coming from a deeper place. And we definitely do value heart. So I put a quote in here: put your heart, mind, and soul into even your smallest acts. This is the secret of success. So, of course, we're going to be talking about what we conceptualize putting our heart into work is, our heart into leadership, and the belief that that is part of our overall success. So one thing that we often talk about when we think about heart is often a dichotomy. So between two different types of items, oftentimes the opposites of one another, as if there's only two choices. You either have heart or your brains, your heart or head. And that's not true. And so that's why the term that we're going to go over, emotional intelligence, is really important, because emotions are a part of intelligence as well. So moving forward, heart. And thank you, Juan, for participating. So I am going to pull up a whiteboard because I would like you to tell me some of your famous leaders that you have, and those that you look up to, and what qualities they possess that you look up to. So let me share the whiteboard. Okay. Feel free to shout out any names. I'm going to put one down of my own.
Hardworking.
Hardworking. Names of other famous leaders.
Bernie Sanders.
Okay.
And equality is passionate.
Passionate, yes. Anyone else have other folks?
Cesar Chavez.
Great. And what would you like to say as a quality of Cesar Chavez?
Courageous and influential, I see.
Brenda, anyone you'd like to add to our list?
Dolores Huerta. I think when I think about her, I think about being impactful, even generations.
Yes. So I think what's interesting, well, what are you seeing from the list that we've crafted? Any connections stand out to you?
There's some form of like activism.
Activism, for sure. I mean, I know the ones that I put down specifically are started movements or faces of movements that have to do with social change. And then when you look at the others, Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta follow in line with that as well. And then even Bernie Sanders. So I don't know if I, by starting off with one of the famous leaders that we look to in history, if that got our minds thinking in that way or not. But it's interesting to kind of think of those connections and what are the things that we value about these leaders. So a lot of it is that passion, courage, being inspired, working hard toward having an impact. So that's something that we value about our leaderships just within this group within here. And I think that makes sense given what we're talking about. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the presentation. Thank you for participating in that. And part of the reason that I have us thinking about these leaders is because those are the folks that we often try to emulate or we try and become, and that's how we view leadership. Okay, so next thing is so I've talked a lot about, okay, what is emotional intelligence? What is EQ? So now we're gonna watch a short video clip that talks about it specifically.
reasoning. Since the dawn of humanity, the understanding of well-being and rational decision-making has remained relatively unchanged. However, recent discoveries in neuroscience and psychology may fundamentally change long-held theories about emotions and reasoning. One recent study analyzed patients who had experienced damage to the amygdala, a primitive part of the brain that typically regulates emotions. What they discovered was that these patients had often lost their ability to feel emotions and make basic decisions. The implication of this discovery is that our decisions are not determined simply by logic or emotions alone, but rather a combination of the two. When we make a bad decision that affects our well-being, it is typically caused by an imbalance between our reasoning and our emotions. This process of understanding and facilitating emotions into rational thinking is known as emotional intelligence. Originally developed in 1990 by John Mayer, David Caruso, and Peter Salovey, the theory of emotional intelligence can be broken down into 4 simple aspects. 1. The ability to perceive emotion. For humans, cues like facial expressions and gestures can indicate complex emotions that influence our understanding of other people, such as happiness, sadness, anger, and fear. 2. Understanding emotions. Emotions convey information. For example, happiness usually indicates a desire to join with other people. Sadness indicates a desire to avoid people, and so on. Each emotion conveys its own patterns of possible messages and actions associated with those messages. 3. Using emotions to facilitate thought. In recent years, cognitive scientists have discovered that emotions prioritize our thinking. Therefore, having a good system of emotional input can help you focus on things that truly matter. 4. Managing emotions. Managing emotions involves the ability to promote certain types of behavior through emotions and using them to your advantage. For example, if you're sad, you're more likely to be reflective and analytical. If you are happy, you're more likely to be social and outgoing. These 4 aspects that make up emotional intelligence inform our decisions, help predict life outcomes, and help us understand people in order to build healthy relationships.
All right. So, what are your thoughts on what we just watched? Anyone care to share?
Well, watching this, I really liked what they're saying about the how being rational really does depend on being intelligent and being logic and emotions. A lot of times, I don't think when you're thinking rationally, you have to only think intelligently or only thinking non-emotionally. But I like how thinking rationally is thinking about holistically, thinking about all perspectives, thinking about more than just one way, thinking about multiple ways. I think that's what it took from it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a shift in thought. I think we often view having emotions as being problematic in making decisions, as not having a good outcome when you're making a decision emotionally. And I think this video talks about how, well, the amygdala, which is something that controls and manages our emotions, they talked about folks who had impaired amygdalas and how they couldn't make basic decisions. So obviously emotions are a huge factor in making a decision. And ultimately, if you are being imbalanced in either way, you're going to make a poor decision if you're not factoring in both in a balanced way. And that's emotional intelligence. So being balanced in the decision that you're making, factoring in both the emotions and logic. So I really liked how it made it very clear. And I do think that oftentimes, like I said, that negative connotation around emotions, which prevents folks from being able to fully express their true emotions and to lead with heart. So I really love philosophy, so I put in a quote by Plato that all learning has an emotional base. So each of you came to this session for a reason to learn, and you've already engaged with your emotions by sharing. So again, I thank you so much for doing that. We're going to break down the information into the 4 attributes of emotional intelligence. So the first one that we have is self-awareness. So it's really important. We start inward, we start with ourselves, and then we go to society, we go to others. So the first thing is to be aware of yourself, to recognize your own emotions and how they affect your thoughts and behaviors, knowing your strengths and weaknesses, and having self-confidence. So oftentimes we hear the phrase about a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're going in expecting a certain result, oftentimes that you'll create the scenario in which you will be that way, whether it is that way or not. It's simply because that's the paradigm in which you're viewing it. And I know myself, I've been in this situation where I've thought, oh my God, they thought XYZ about that situation. And it was really just my feelings of insecurity in that moment, because when I checked in with trusted colleagues afterward, they're like, no, that was not what was happening on it at all. So really what we can control is our own self and being aware of what our emotions are in that moment and how that might be impacting how we're operating in the space, how we're operating in the world, and the decisions that we make. So the more that we focus on understanding ourselves, understanding where we could grow, and also what our strengths are, what we can provide to a group dynamic, to the world, to what we're passionate about, the better that we are in accomplishing that. So the second part, once you have self-awareness, it's one thing to know, like, you know, right now I feel pretty confident doing this presentation because I'm among folks that I know. And it's another thing to manage from there. Like, okay, if I was feeling self-conscious about this, then what could I do to manage that moment? I did mindfulness on Monday, and so I know a couple of activities that I could participate in to get myself in a good state to continue to present. So self-management is you're able to control impulsive feelings and behaviors, manage your emotions in healthy ways, take initiative, follow through on commitments, and adapt to changing circumstances. So it's easier to be in a great state of mind, especially in California when the sun is out. It's amazing. But right now, as we're speaking, it's raining outside. It's pretty gloomy. And so how do we respond to that as well, like, and manage our emotions, because we still have to work, or we still have to go to class and get our stuff done. And so we still have to be attentive to what is being shared with us and do that homework assignments. And that's where self-management come into play. So making sure that we're managing that effectively and that we're not just going to Netflix instead of focusing on the work that we have to do. We have to get it in at a certain time, then we'll submit that. Hopefully that makes sense. So once we've conquered, all right, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I need to do to be in a good emotional state, be in a good positive place where I can be productive. Now we do not live in a bubble. We do not live alone individually. We are out there in the world interacting with folks virtually and otherwise right now. So how do we navigate in spaces with other folks, with other decision makers too? Because we don't get to just determine what happens, because we live in community. So social awareness is you can understand the emotions, needs, and concerns of other people, pick up on emotional cues, feel comfortable socially, and recognize the power dynamics in a group or organization. So breaking that down, it's being able to recognize the room, recognize your audience. When your friend makes a certain face, what is that friend saying? Their words may be, yes, let's go do that activity, but is their face actually matching that? Is their emotion really saying, yes, I definitely want to go do X, Y, Z? Or are they really like, I like you and I want to hang out with you, but I don't really want to do that? And so having that social awareness is recognizing all of the different signs that give you a clue as to what somebody else's emotions are, needs, or concerns are. And this is effective because if you have to work in a group, understanding that means that you can be more effective. If it looks like your study group needs to take a break and get a pick-me-up and go to Starbucks, then take that break. Or if you yourself are noticing that people are falling asleep while you're Zoom chatting them, then that's something that you could think of, hey, what would be a more productive time for us to have this meeting? Because, typically that's when you're sleeping or whatever that is. So being able to pick up on those emotional cues, feeling comfortable around other people socially will help you. Understanding the power dynamics in a group or organization. I think that's one of the biggest keys, especially as you develop your leadership, is just recognizing that how does the flow go? Oftentimes when we make decisions, we all might know what the right decision is, but in having to honor the emotions of the folks around us, you can't just make that decision in a straight line. Oftentimes it has to be suggested, or it has to be brought up in a certain way in which folks will accept that because other people have emotions and they respond to those different emotions. And we're not going to go into different triggers and whatnot, but that's something that in society that we do have to address, is that some people have experienced pain. Some people have gone through different things, and we want to be sensitive and inclusive in our language when we're talking to them to make sure that they feel included into this space as well. And just because we might be very comfortable being, like I can speak to myself, I'm very comfortable in the uncomfortable. I can thank my mom for that, but yeah, I had a mom who was like, go talk to strangers, the opposite of what some of us have been told. So I'm very comfortable around different scenarios, but for me, that's not everybody, right? So if we want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable, it's becoming more aware of our entire environment. And then moving forward to that, if you can be respectful and understanding of what's happening in your dynamics, then you can manage relationships and you can build that. So relationship management is how to develop and maintain good relationships, communicate clearly, inspire and influence others, and work well in a team and manage conflict. Of course, no time like the present to know just how globalized we are in the world. So it's really important that you do establish those relationships and to maintain those relationships. It isn't just, built off one moment. Hey, I've decided you're my friend and now we're friends. We do know relationships have an ebb and flow. And in order to maintain that, it's really being, again, aware of what's happening with the folks around you, paying attention to those cues and communicating clearly. Like if you find a miscommunication, use that as an opportunity to try and understand that person's paradigm, their way of looking at the world, so that you can come to a shared reality of what's going on. And the importance of having a good relationship is, yeah, it helps you to feel good. It helps you to be productive. It helps you to get to your goal, because one individual, we need to be in community. We need to be together to move forward and to move forward positively. So I'm sure most of you have worked on a team project before, and when you're not doing these other steps that we went over, that's when conflict arises. And oftentimes conflict arises because we lack the self-awareness of like where our issues are. And at times, like if we're insecure about it, it's something we're not as forthcoming about that. But if we're more aware of, hey, this isn't my skill set, and we're transparent maybe of that not being a skill set, or we take the steps to get the education and the learning that we need to improve in that area, then it ceases to become that issue. But if you become aware, then you yourself can manage where you're at and make sure that when you're in those group meetings, that you've eaten the food that you need, you've hydrated, and you're your best self, so that you can really tackle whatever the issue is in that meeting. And again, you could be great, everything's awesome, you're walking on sunshine, but it's raining outside. And so what is happening with everyone else around you? and being able to manage if you're not as productive because you need the group to get things done, being aware of what that is, coming up with a solution on how you can work toward that. And then valuing that relationship, managing those relationships so that that doesn't happen in future. So I always look at embracing conflict when it comes up. It's an opportunity to better understand others. It's an opportunity to better understand how are we managing stuff, and then really what's going on with ourselves. So just that interesting connection, which is why I really love talking about emotional intelligence. So moving forward, I talked a lot about the 4 different attributes, but I want to give an opportunity if anyone has questions or things that they want to add before we go into a group exercise. Does anyone want to share? Feel free to raise your hand or just speak. Okay, I don't see anyone doing so, so we will move on. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to cover is, this is one of a great resource that I have found. Berkeley actually came together with this. And so one of the things that I talked about that had to do with the social awareness piece is being able to observe these cues, these social cues, which are facial expressions of others. So I'm going to make sure that when I upload this to YouTube that I also add the link to this so you can go and you can actually do this quiz on your own. But we're going to do a couple together just to kind of see where we think we're at. So if you can unmute your Zoom so that you can participate in this, we're going to take a quiz that tests our emotional intelligence. And we're going to go with whatever the majority is as far as this first facial expression. Okay, so let's take a look at this facial expression. Now, this face is expressing one of these 4 things. Okay, so we even got a cheat sheet. It's multiple choice here. But what do we think they are expressing? So it's embarrassment, fear, sadness, or surprise.
Fear.
Okay, I've got 1 for fear.
Surprise.
1 for surprise.
Embarrassment.
1 for embarrassment.
Embarrassment.
Okay, so 2 for embarrassment. Okay, let's see what we got. But even just before we get the answer, we had 3 different answers. Okay, so this is how interesting it is, again, in trying to understand the emotions of others. It's very complex. Legitimately, no one guessed the correct answer. Okay, and so none of this is to make you feel embarrassed by this at all, like we thought initially, but it's just something to be aware of when we're looking into it and trying to hone in our emotional intelligence. So, eyebrows. So when somebody is expressing fear, their muscle contracts to pull the eyebrows up and in. The eyelids, lower eyelids contract and upper eyelids raise slightly. And then the lips, the corners get pulled sideways, tightening and elongating the mouth. So with the answer being fear, we express fear when we feel physically or psychologically threatened. The facial expression of fear is often confused with surprise, but when we're surprised, our eyes open wider than when we're afraid, and our mouth isn't pulled sideways like it is here. Instead, our jaw drops and the mouth hangs open. Plus, our eyebrows are relatively flat when we're afraid, and they arch more when we're surprised. So very interestingly, I just think about emojis, right? That was one of the thoughts that came to me. And looking at this is that even our emojis kind of reflect that in some way. All right, we're gonna do 2 more together, and then I encourage you to look at this later. Okay. So just take a second. Do you think he is is expressing flirtatiousness, interest, happiness, or politeness?
Happiness.
Happiness, I heard.
Happiness.
2 for happiness,
Happiness.
3 for happiness. Panda?
It's a happiness.
Okay. All right.
Actually, politeness.
I mean, I'm thinking politeness, but I still think the majority is happiness, so let's go. Y'all were right. I was wrong on politeness. This is happiness. Okay. So eyelids, muscles tighten around the eyes, and there's a pouching of the lower eyelid, and then corners of the lips are pulled upward. So good job, y'all. This is a classic display of a genuine smile. I don't know how to pronounce Duchenne smile, which signals happiness. It's defined by 2 muscle movements. The movement common to all smiles is the zygomatic, I'm gonna remember that for Scrabble Go, major muscle pulling the lip corners down. But critically, what reveals this as a genuine smile is what happens around the eyes. The muscles tighten, making those wrinkles or crow's feet around the eyes, the sides of the eyes, and creating that pouching of the lower eyelid. When you see these signs, the person isn't just smiling politely, they're feeling genuine happiness. Okay. So there's 20 of these, so you can do these on your time. So we'll do this one's the last one, okay? So take a look. We think he's either expressing sadness, pain, anger, or distrust.
Anger.
Anger.
2 for anger so far.
Anger.
I say pain.
Okay. So anger was the majority. Anger is the answer. Good job, y'all. Okay, so the forehead, the muscle contracts to furrow the brow. The eyelids, muscle contracts to tighten lower eyelids and raise upper eyelids. And the lips tighten and press together. I think that's a very big clue and sign there. So you see these muscle movements in the lips, around the eyes, and in the brow when people are feeling aggressive, threatened, or frustrated. Researchers think we make this expression when we're angry because it could protect the face in physical conflict. For example, the furrowed brows could protect the eyes. People often confuse anger and disgust, but disgust involves a raised upper lip and a wrinkle in the nose that you don't see here. So, yes. So that's something I highly encourage you to look into, as this could help you to navigate more and looking at social cues and working with others and really kind of understanding the folks that you're working with and maybe the impact that you're having or the space in general, so you can be more productive and successful as a leader. And I'd say this is really important when you are leading, to be more aware of your group and your surroundings when you're talking about stuff, because then you can identify folks who may be supportive of what's being said or might have other additional things they may not feel comfortable sharing in a group setting. So you can do those follow-ups with them about it. Okay, go back. All right, so we did the group exercise. Okay, so talked a lot about the different parts of emotional intelligence, but why is it important? I think I highlighted a lot of that, but why is it important to you all? Anyone who'd like to share?
I think it's important, like you were sharing earlier, you know, and there's situations where you're working with a team and with different people, and it's important to be able to read cues, kind of to read the room as well, especially, you know, if like something happened amongst your team or amongst, you know, your fellow like colleagues or workers, just to be able to, you know, sense what's going on before saying anything that could like either like worsen the situation or, you know, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really important. And a lot of it is like, if you're not aware of what's happening, you might have no idea what's going to happen post that. And I'd say just an experience that if you find people aren't meeting certain deadlines or they're not getting projects done in that way, it would be something that I'd say look into yourself as to maybe how you're communicating the information, maybe like what is your relationship with other folks of getting stuff done, because oftentimes there are emotions or feelings involved, and it's not really about the work. It's about that impact. And when people feel a certain kind of way, it's not very motivating to get the work done. So it's trying to address that and get to a place of mutual understanding. And maybe the way to do that is to get back to like, what is the mission that you share collectively together? Anyone else want to share why they think emotional intelligence is important? And I talked a lot about, my experiences in just working and being a leader, because I do manage a team. But emotional intelligence is helpful in all aspects of your life, intimate, because it's about like relationships. It's about the relationship with yourself, and then it's the relationship that you have with other people. And you don't just interact with people when it comes to work, you interact in so many other capacities with them. So if you can be more aware of yourself, manage your own emotions, you could be, experience greater happiness, making better decisions that benefit yourself and the folks that you care about as well. And so this is a quote that I found: "There is no weakness in being able to love fully. It takes courage, tenacity, and an emotional intelligence that most people are incapable of." And so I think it's important to just say it's okay to have emotions. It's okay to feel them. It's okay to need to step out at times. It's okay to say no and establish your boundaries of like, I'm not in the right state of mind to have this conversation. Like I'm feeling overwhelmed, and to be vulnerable in sharing that. You should not be judged for having emotions. We all have emotions. And I think it's the first step, right, of being aware of it and then working toward managing that. And so I think, I can't say it enough that it's important that you recognize that it's okay and it's normal to have them and to seek to work to manage them. And if you can do that, then you will be successful. And so to end out on a positive note, this is one of my favorite clips. Okay, so my favorite movie is Liar Liar, starring Jim Carrey. So I absolutely love him. And so we're gonna watch a video.
Pathway to the future, but all there will ever, you can spend your whole life imagining ghosts, worrying about the pathway to the future, but all there will ever be is what's happening here, and the decisions we make in this moment, which are based in either love or fear. So many of us choose our path out of fear disguised as practicality. What we really want seems impossibly out of reach and ridiculous to expect, so we never dare to ask the universe for it. I'm saying I'm the proof that you can ask the universe for it. Please. I can tell you from experience, the effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is. My father could have been a great comedian, but he didn't believe that that was possible for him. And so he made a conservative choice. Instead, he got a safe job as an accountant. And when I was 12 years old, he was let go from that safe job. And our family had to do whatever we could to survive. I learned many great lessons from my father, not the least of which was that you can fail at what you don't want. So you might as well take a chance on doing what you love. That peace that we're after lies somewhere beyond personality. Your need for acceptance can make you invisible in this world. Don't let anything stand in the way of the light that shines through this form. Risk being seen in all of your glory. As far as I can tell, it's just about letting the universe know what you want and working toward it while letting go of how it comes to pass. And when I say life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you, I really don't know if that's true. I'm just making a conscious choice to perceive challenges as something beneficial so that I can deal with them in the most productive way. You'll come up with your own style. That's part of the fun. Like many of you, I was concerned about going out into the world and doing something bigger than myself, until someone smarter than myself made me realize that there is nothing bigger than myself. You are ready and able to do beautiful things in this world. And after you walk through those doors today, you will only ever have two choices: love or fear. Choose love, and don't ever let fear turn you against your playful heart. Thank you so much. Thank you, Odell. I'm so honored. Thank you.
All right. So obviously one of my favorites, it's a very long, like it's a longer clip because it's what he did as far as his speech. He gave this speech to a graduating class, and this was, probably like 6 years ago. But I just think there's so many points to what he was saying that kind of talk about emotional intelligence in a way of just kind of being present and choosing a certain attitude, and that self-fulfilling prophecy, having that for good, and knowing that there's nothing bigger than yourself. I mean, emotional intelligence starts with you, and you are that change agent. You're that change factor in everything else by controlling what's within your sphere of control. And I mean, he's really successful. So he obviously chose his passion, and that was his path in life. And it's proof that you can go after your own dreams, and you don't have to do what, quote unquote, is that rational choice, the smart choice necessarily. The smart choice in it is going to be that combination of your heart and head. It's going to be that balance. Again, using your emotional intelligence will help you make the best decisions that are honoring to you. So in the end, I hope that you all can take away that self-awareness is key. It's going to help you to better connect with others. Being able to connect with yourself is almost like role modeling to others. If you're connected to yourself, it's going to make you more open to connecting with other people and being able to relate to them and understand their emotions as well. So be brave. I encourage you all to share your truth, to be honest about the emotions that you're experiencing, to let that be a part of the factor of decisions that are being made. It's important that that is heard and that is an input given and considered before making a decision. It doesn't mean that, just because feelings might be hurt that you're not going to make that decision. It might still be the best decision given what's going on, but at least it's been given that space to be considered and that you're aware of it. Because there's a lot of feelings that when you avoid that and you don't give it the appropriate attention, that has a bad impact, a negative impact. So considering that. Dare to be inspired and inspire others by role modeling that leadership and bringing that a part of what you're saying as well. And I think it's important that you seek to understand others, reading the facial cues, because that'll help you to be more productive and successful in whatever it is that you need to accomplish. And I think especially this time, we definitely know that we're very, very connected as a world. So it's important to recognize that and to respect one another, accept one another, and to be our authentic selves to do so. So yeah, those are my takeaways. Anyone else want to add anything before I close out the session? Feel free to just shout out.
I just want to say thank you for the presentation and the quiz. It was interesting to see the different facial expressions and then like the end result too.
I know, it's funny because I've done that quiz a bunch and I'm like, I'm not sure. All right, well, thank you so much for participating. I appreciate your time today. And I hope that you learned something and you have some resources now to check into a little bit more. And feel free to reach out to me. I mean, I have worked on a lot of different teams and managed different teams, so I have lots of different experiences to talk about, like when I did things well and when I didn't do things so well. And I think kind of like what Jim Carrey was saying, it's learning from that. You know, failures are just like the L's are not losses, they're lessons. So looking at it with that kind of an attitude, it's, you know, improving and moving forward. And I think it's a part of thriving as well. So I hope that you've enjoyed the first Thriving Thursday. Check this out on YouTube. We'll be back next Thursday at 3 to talk more about how you can thrive. So thank you all and have a great day.